Dolphins are curious, they're playful, they're smart, they have this cool echolocation thing. But our perception of them comes almost entirely from the bottlenose. Some people know about the orcas or the river dolphins, but there's a total of 40 different species of dolphin. And most of them, they don't get any recognition. But there are a few that I think should be more well known. For instance, the common dolphin. As the name might suggest, it's a pretty common dolphin. In fact, it was the first one that was known to science. Well, first known to European science, but given its global distribution, quite possibly to science in general. Because it's the most common one. There are 6 million of them roaming the oceans. That's 10 times more than all the bottlenoses. Like, for every bottlenose, there are 10 common dolphins. But the thing is, they're not like bottlenose dolphins. They're not playful. Well, not with humans. Probably with each other, but not with humans. Instead, if you put them in a tank, they're going to notice that a person got in, and they're just going to swim to the bottom and try to hide away. Obviously, gotta come up for air at some point, but they're going to try and hide away. So, yeah, they couldn't be used for sows. That wasn't their thing. They had to be replaced by the bottlenose. Which is why the bottlenose gets all of the glory. And another dolphin that's not all that friendly is Risso's dolphin. In fact, they are violent creatures. Their entire social hierarchy, that is enforced with violence. So much violence that the older males, well, look at that guy. That guy is purely white, and white comes from scars. That is how often that dude got into fights. And you know what's crazy? They don't have that many teeth. They have the least amount of teeth of any dolphin out there. At most, they'll have 14. But some subspecies, they only have 4. That dude was scarred up by someone who needs dentures. But not every dolphin is so incredibly violent with each other. There's Commerson's dolphin. This little panda fish is tiny. The males, they are just 4.5 feet long, which means they could actually be smaller than the vaquita. What's impressive is where they live. They, most of the time, are found in South America. But there's one small little population over on the Kerguelen Islands, and it's basically on the other side of the world. And there's nothing in between. There's no population in Africa, there's no population in Antarctica. It's just South America and the other side of the world. So how did they get there? Well, years ago, there was a sighting of a Commerson's dolphin off the coast of South Africa. It's not a whole population, it's just some lone male most likely, but it does tell the story, possibly, of how they got there. To get to Africa from Kerguelen, you have to swim against the current. You have to fight it the whole way through. So it's much more likely that they went from South America to Africa, swimming with the current helping them, and they did get outcompeted in Africa, but they did manage to find their way over to Kerguelen, again following the current, and there wasn't any competition, so they just lived perfectly fine. And it's especially impressive because, again, this is a 4.5 foot dolphin. it's not big. It shouldn't be that strong. And yet it's making a massive journey. And if that is how Commersons got to the Kerguelen Islands, then that would mean that their entire genus has circumnavigated the globe, just gone all the way across. Because we know the original Cephalorhynchus. It's Heaviside's dolphin, and Heavisides lives in Africa. So, Heavisides, it started in Africa, then it followed the currents all the way out to New Zealand and Australia, and then after that, it got to South America, and now back to Africa. And at every stop of the way, the populations, they got isolated because this is a rare journey, so they had the time to just become their own independent species. Which is starting to happen to the dolphins on Kerguelen, well, not on, by Kerguelen Island, because they're actually a different color than the ones in South America. So eventually, they too will be their own species. But what of New Zealand? I mentioned they got to New Zealand, so where are they? What are they? Well, they're Hector's dolphin. And they're known for, well, really they're only known for one thing, being really endangered. They're not exactly near the top of the list. I think it's more like on either the North or South Island that they're really endangered. But they're famous for being endangered nonetheless. But one thing that they could be famous for is their balls. Their balls are massive. Obviously, it's stored internally so you can't see it, but their testicles take up 3% of their entire body weight. And your brain only takes up 2%. So, take your brain, add another half to it, and that's how big the balls on these things are. Let's stick with New Zealand for a little bit and go to the lawn-finned pilot whale. Dolphins, whales, they'll beach themselves. It's a sad event because they're usually fairly big animals, hard to get them back in the water. And that is especially true for the lawn-finned pilot whale, which, despite the name, it is a dolphin. It's over 1,000 pounds, it is a big boy. And they especially love to beach themselves in New Zealand. In 2017, 600 of them wound up on the shore of the Chatham Islands. And again, it's hard to get them back in the water, so you just got a bunch of whale carcasses right there on the beach. So much for tourist season there. And that wasn't even the biggest one. The biggest beaching of these lawn-finned guys, that was in 1918, and 1,000 of them. 1,000 just on the shore, and it's 1918. People aren't even trying to put them in the water. They're looking at it like, ooh, that's a lot of food. So, those whales, yeah, dead. But on a less depressing note, their size allows them to do something that's actually kind of cool. See, they often interact with orcas. And for the most part, the interactions are neutral, they're peaceful enough. And occasionally, yes, the orca will hunt them because they are a little smaller. They're not smaller by a lot, but they are a little smaller. However, because they're close in size, and because they run in groups, they can actually scare off the killer whales. There are recorded cases of orcas just swimming one direction, and then they realize there's some lawn-fin pilot whales coming, and they're coming fast. So the orcas, they just turn away and book it as fast as they can because they are scared. As far as I'm aware, there's no recorded fighting from the longfin pilot whales actually attacking the orcas. But it had to have happened. Like, orcas will hunt a sperm whale without a second thought. So the pilot whales must have attacked them at some point, and it must have done a ton of damage, because these orcas are traumatized. But that's enough about that. Let's move on to just cosmetics. Because some things, you just like them because they're good to look at. Case in point, the Atlantic white-sided dolphin. In my opinion, it looks like it couldn't decide on a color palette. Like you've got black there, white, gray, tan for some reason. And it's a little messy for my taste, but it looks interesting. But my personal favorite, that's the hourglass dolphin here. Like, look at this thing. It's a little guy. And it's got such unique markings to it. Like, surprise, surprise, like an hourglass. But maybe you do like the bottlenose aesthetic. I know I've been keeping away from it a little bit, but there's a reason they are popular. They do look fairly cute. But what if you wanted to spice it up a bit? Maybe, give it some freckles. This is an Atlantic spotted dolphin. And the reason it looks like a bottlenose so much is because it kind of is and kind of isn't. They are in a different genus, so they're not that related to each other, but they're close enough to where they can interbreed and have perfectly healthy offspring. And because of that constant hybridization, the Atlantic spotted is very close to the bottlenose because that's technically their lineage. In fact, they're closer to the bottlenose than they are to the dolphins in their own genus. That's how much the hybridization has been happening. And that means that the evolutionary tree doesn't really look like it usually would. Like, instead of just, oh, it split off and now it's split off forever. Instead, it's like, it split off, then eventually came back together, and now it's just kind of this weird, muddled mess of a thing. But the clymene is that on steroids, because this thing is also a hybrid. It's a hybrid of a spinner dolphin and a striped dolphin, and it's its own species. It went through hybrid speciation, which is where a hybrid, instead of going back to the gene pools of its parents, it's just its own thing. And for that to happen, you basically need the parent species in an enclosed area. Like they go into this little gulf or something, and they mate, and they have to do that so much that they are mating with the other species more than their own, which will end up kind of erasing their own species from them, but obviously still producing their genetics. It's just combined into a specific species, in this case, the clymene dolphin. And speaking of having a pretty good relationship outside of your species, though not like that, we have the Irrawaddy river dolphin of Southeast Asia. And it gets along with the fishermen, the human fishermen. And it will help them catch more fish. What the fishermen will do is they'll row their boats out to the water, they'll cast their nets, and then they'll bang a key against their boat or slap the oar against the water. And the dolphins will hear that and think, oh, time to go to work. And they'll herd the fish that are obviously trying to run away from them. They'll herd them into those nets. And then the fishermen, they bring up the nets, they have their fish, and then the fish they don't want, they'll throw back to the dolphins. The end result is the human fishermen, they get more fish, and they get it a lot easier and more quickly, And the dolphins, they also get more fish because they only have to chase it once, and then they get their food, like guaranteed catches. Sounds like a pretty good deal. And it was such a good deal for both sides that places and people started to get a little bit possessive. Certain dolphins would become associated with certain villages, and they'd give them names. And in some cases, a lot of cases actually, specific dolphins would be known to work for specific people. And if that fisherman saw his dolphin working for somebody else, he would take that other fisherman to court and he would sue him for damages and usually get a portion of the fish that the guy had caught. The dolphin, no punishment for the dolphin, because in Vietnam, they're seen as sacred. In Laos and Cambodia, they're straight up the reincarnated ancestors who are there to protect them from drowning and crocodiles. Needless to say, they love these dolphins, and if they get one of these dolphins in their net by accident, they'll cut the net, let the dolphin go free. But nothing good can stay forever, and at some point, people move. Foreigners come in, and in this case, Muslim settlers from India and elsewhere, they came in, and they didn't know that these dolphins were helpful. To them, it was just another dolphin. So, if they catch it, they would just keep it. But it's not a complete, decimation of the population, because dolphins are fairly smart, and the Irrawaddy, it's learned what the language of the newcomers is. So, it just goes up, takes a listen, hears that it's a newcomer, and moves on to a different village, just leaves that area entirely. By now, you can probably see that there's a lot of things going on for dolphins. So much that I could not possibly put it in one video. Like the La Plata dolphin. It has the longest beak to body size ratio of any cetacean out there. And you know all those oceanic dolphins? If you look, you might have noticed they never turn their head. That's because the vertebrae in their necks are fused together. Obviously, that reduces flexibility, and they can't really turn their head left or right. And they can't really do much about up or down either. They have to, curve their whole body to do it. Meanwhile, river dolphins, they have the full range of motion. They can just turn left, turn right, turn up, turn down, turn wherever they want. But if I did tell you everything, well, you wouldn't leave here curious. So, that's enough for today.
I walk this lonely road, in my bag I have a giant toad.